Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my partner, my co-host, my co-founder of Just Two Dads, Mr. Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today's conversation is about inclusion. And inclusion is a big word. Actually, it's a small word that represents a big idea and a big ideal. And so today's guest is somebody who's very involved in the movement of inclusion in our society, in our family, at home, in schools, in our businesses. And so what does that all mean? We're going to talk about that today on Just Two Dads. Awesome. Hello again, everybody. My name is Brian Altunian. We're live on Facebook with Shawn Francis and our guest today, which is you're going to love our guest and this conversation around inclusion. Before we get to her, though, I just want to thank everybody who's catching us live on Facebook. If you're hitting us and you want to throw a comment into the comment section, sometimes we'll throw it up on the screen. If you've got a question that you want us to ask Kayla, our guest today, please do that. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel at Just Two Dads, please hit the like and subscribe, share the content with your friends. For those of you listening on podcast outlets everywhere, hello. We hope that we try to make sure that there's no gaps so that we are very conscious of our listeners of a podcast. How many times have you like you guys listen to podcasts where there's like this gap? It's so terrible, isn't it? Like that, right? It's a terrible thing. So anyways, we try to cut that out. And for those listening on WSTX AM radio and our friend, Mr. Robert Moorhead, who just said hello, welcome and thank you for having us down there. And today is it's going to be a great conversation, and how this all came about is also a great story too. It's amazing when you start having conversations with people in your community and you start thinking about the needs of our families who have family members who have special needs or a medically complex issue or, a personal issue where they feel like they're held out, they're singled out, they're alone, they're there's a lot of stigma around a lot of things these days. And so if you're just having a conversation with somebody, know that magic can occur. Today's guest came about by a casual conversation that a friend of mine had with a patient of hers who happened to be Kayla's mother. So it's great how the connection all happens, and we're excited to get into the conversation. Before we get to Kayla, we're going to talk to Mr. Shawn Francis, my friend and cohort. By the way, I love it. You've got your glasses on today, and so we can't actually see. For those who don't know, Shawn actually suffered a very serious sports injury this week. And do you want to show everybody the eye or not?
I don't know how much of it. I don't know how much of it they can see.
It's
come a long ways. Yeah,
nice big shiner there.
I want to make sure, because of what I plan to do, I want to make sure that we don't delay Kayla any further. But one of my intention is not to embarrass you, but that is about to take place, Brian, because it's early, but I need to make sure that everybody knows this, because life is to be celebrated. And while it's a day early, tomorrow is Brian's birthday. So with that in mind, I'll keep it nice and short, but happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brian. Happy birthday to you. Appreciate you much.
Thank you, buddy. That was sweet. Love that.
Hey, look,
that was so good.
I would have put a lot more into it, and I could have done a lot better, but I also want to do justice to our guest today. One of the great pleasures in life is being able to have this platform to shine a light on people that support the special needs community. We always say that, there's no such thing as special needs. Everyone has the same need to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, and know that they matter. But we do have special accommodations and special routes and platforms by which we get people that equality when they have a disability or cognitive delay or something. And we're all going to be members of the special needs community if you're not, even if it's just by the gift of a long life through aging. Right. But it's one thing, it's automatic to become a member of the special needs community and become a warrior and a representative, if you will, when your child or loved one is has an injury or a diagnosis. But I am so taken by people that make a conscious choice and decide to raise their hand and choose to become a member of that community and are not a member by any kind of circumstance. And our guest today is someone who fits that description. So I can't wait to hear her story and her path and how she got here. And that is none other than Kayla Coburn. Kayla, welcome to Just Do Dads.
Hi, thank you. Thank you both for having me. And I'm sorry about your eye.
No, it's
that birthday song was so great. I wanted to jump in and I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to keep up with that.
Well, thank you so much. No, but it's coming along. Matter of fact, as soon as we're finished, I'm going to the eye doctor just to make sure. But my brother and a friend got me out of the house and to play some basketball. And I just thought of something. At this stage of life, you look at the gift and everything. And one of the greatest reasons to move or break a sweat or do any kind of physical activity is because you can, because some people, based on their age or certain stages in life, aren't able to do that. So we got to make sure that we utilize all the gifts that we have. And so with that said, you probably don't look at yourself as any kind of hero. You just do what you do. You do what you love to do. But we're here to tell you that you're wrong. We see you as a hero, especially being a member of our community by choice. And all heroes have superpowers, and all powers come from a hero's origin. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how the heck you got to be such, an esteemed member of our community and the things you're working on, where you want to go and all that great stuff.
Okay. So I can't even tell you where it all started, but just growing up, I've kind of always been thinking of being a teacher. My mom kind of always thought, I was always trying to teach my sister things. I just seemed to have fallen into that role. And so when I went to college, I was like, yeah, I'll be a teacher. In high school, I learned sign language. And then in college, I volunteered with a group called KEEN, Kids Enjoy Energy Exercise Now. Kids Enjoy Exercise Now. Mm-hmm. And that was a population where I think like 80% of them were on the autism spectrum. And a lot of them were nonverbal, and they used sign language to communicate. And I was like, oh, well, this works out. I already know sign language. And I was loving using it in such a different way. And so then I was like, okay, I think I want to go into special education. And I'm not really quite sure why I chose extensive support needs, but that is just the direction I chose. And I loved it. And then I became a one-on-one aide for a student who is deafblind and loved that even more. And so what I just kept learning was the students that, in my opinion, probably get kind of like neglected the most. Those were the students, like, the students that people are like, oh, they're too hard to include, or they're too hard to give access to the curriculum, or, it's too hard for them to come to this event. Those were the students that I was like, no, and I'm going to show you that they can come and do all these things. So I think that just like really kept pushing it. And yeah, I mean, it's really just kept going. And then when I was a teacher, I just started an Instagram account called Inclusion Starts Now. And my first year teaching was like my last year in grad school. So I was doing this master program to do, I was making PowerPoint, like a set of presentations for general ed teachers on how to work with students with disabilities. I got to do it at the school I was working at. And then I kind of made this buddy class curriculum that encouraged mainstreaming and reverse mainstreaming with classes, where it was really just like to practice social skills. And it was like really simple art activities, but just had the students working together and forming genuine relationships. And then I just, kept going. But then teaching was starting, like, I felt great after it was going well. But then I moved to Southern California, and it all kept going. Like everything that I kind of put into place, the whole, the community all really liked what was happening. So they just kept doing it. And so then I got to my next school and I was like, oh, easy, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it faster this time. And then I started seeing like, oh, there's bigger problems here.
Right.
Like talking.
Where was the I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where was the
Yeah.
original school? Where did you originally?
I was going to ask you where you're from originally. Yeah.
In the Bay Area. So it's
Okay.
South San Francisco, Daly
So
City.
still California, so still part of the
Yeah,
California school system, but you came down to Southern California and wasn't the same kind of
it
reception.
was super different. And
Wow.
then after that last year of teaching, I then started focusing. All my jobs were in the deaf-blind world. I was working with Helen Keller National Center and California Deaf-Blind Services. And so I was working from people all stages of life who are deaf blind, either if they were born deaf and hard of hearing and started their vision started to deteriorate, or if they were born deaf blind, or if they were older in life and then became deaf blind, because our eyes and ears just aren't really meant to last like hundreds of
Yeah.
years. It feels
Yeah.
like that's how long we're all living now.
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting to see all that too. I can't remember why.
So let me
that.
understand. So you said that it was more difficult in Southern California. There were more barriers in the education system here than you found in the Bay Area.
It was for inclusion, yes. It
That's
was
interesting.
much harder.
It's interesting because I know that people come to California for benefits outside of the school system, with regard to the regional centers and things like that, because what we have here is so exceptional compared to the rest of the country. And I've always wondered what the difference might be between Northern and Southern California. But let's go back a little bit and tell us a little bit. So you are originally from Daly City. Tell us about your upbringing and, how those things shaped the way that well, not even the way that you respond, because you don't have a diagnosis in your family that we know of that you're responding to. You're like, people have the battle brought to them and they're like, I'm going to put on like 5 plates of armor and battle for my kid. Your thing is like, wait a minute. I see that battle taking place in the distance. I want in. That's completely different. And that's why the appreciation runs so deep. So tell us about that, about your family, your upbringing and everything.
Yeah. So I am actually from Southern California. I moved to Northern California for college, and then I was there for a decade. And then I moved back down to Southern California, and now we're moving out of California. So I kind of was just jumping back and forth.
So where are you from originally in Southern California?
San Clemente.
San Clemente. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So Orange County.
Beautiful
And
area.
I guess I also wanted to say, I know LA does, I would say that LA does a better job with inclusive practices compared to Orange County.
Orange
Not
County.
to
See, I didn't even know
Orange
that.
County, but
yeah.
So growing up, because to lead me to that answer, so growing up in Orange County, I did not see a lot of people with disabilities. They were very much, in their own room, had recess at their own time. Like you would randomly see someone with a disability, but there was really no conversation. And if you asked a question, it was like it just kind of got shut down. It was like, I have this very vague memory of this one student, and she was lifting her dress, and we're in elementary school, and so kids start laughing, and the teacher, the adult was just like, like, don't laugh, she's different, like, kind of thing. It was just like, stop laughing. And then there was no conversation, so we just knew we weren't supposed to laugh. But it was like, okay, well, why is she different? Like, why am I not?
So you're not supposed to do anything, just ignore her.
Yeah. So it felt very, interesting. And I have this other memory of, I went to my friend's birthday party, and actually that same student came, and the mom, before the birthday party, like before the girl got there, the mom was telling us, like, she's coming, she has this disability. If you ever feel uncomfortable, you can tell me and I'll just take her, I'll take her away from you, kind of thing. And, the conversation totally could have been different, but my perspective from that point in my life, I was just like, okay, so if I'm scared, like, I'll just tell you and you'll, like, take her away, kind of thing. And, and yeah, so, we weren't taught, like, how to communicate with her. We weren't talked about, like, what kind of things she likes, that she's, like, also a person. And then we were, like, in the pool at one point, and I think she was trying to, like, play with me or hug me or something. But I was, like, very scary for me that she just came over to try to play with me, and I'm, like, swimming in the deep end. And I just remember trying to push her away and getting out. And And then I was like so scared of her because I just had no idea how to communicate with her. And I think that was just a really big turning point. Or like that memory just like really stuck with
Yeah.
me. And so later
Yeah.
in life, when I started teaching and then getting really interested in this field, I was like, man, I wish there was a better conversation that happened to me as a child. Because like, I mean, that poor student who like,
Sure.
you know, she kind of was like at this birthday party, but then like didn't even get to participate with everybody. And like really, I mean, like, and so it's, I
Yeah.
mean, it's really just the whole conversation of like, that's not inclusion. Like having a student sitting in a room with a bunch of peers isn't inclusion.
I'm
Inclusion
hoping
is
everybody,
like
yeah,
actually making those relationships and
I'm
memories.
hoping everybody is catching that, because I got to be honest, I expected to hear something a little more of, you know, the more harsh example of exclusion. So you can tell that that was an attempt, you know, a one that fell short, but it sounds like a sincere attempt to include, but one because of a certain amount of ignorance that fell short, because somebody thought to invite her to the birthday party, right?
Yeah.
That's great, and the teacher or aide is attempting to protect her, but again, fell short. So we need to make sure that we, for those of us that are,
And Sean, I was going to say, it was the child's mom. It wasn't even just the aide,
no,
right?
I'm
So
saying the fact that she got invited at all, like there's an attempt to
yeah.
let's include her, let's invite her,
For sure.
and then and then to your point, her mom, who's like, this is somebody who probably would take a bullet for her. Even her attempt at inclusion is based on what she knows, which is, hey, if you're scared, just, you know, let me know. So we have to. I'm saying this so that those of us that are protectors, that are parents, that are caregivers, remember to give people the grace that we would seek. You know, because sometimes people are rude and cold and just plain mean, but most times people are only responding with the ammunition or the limited ammunition that they have with which to deal with the challenge that's put before them. And if, like, as you said, Kayla, up to that point you hadn't, you know, experienced it, how else would you know how to deal with that? So I just think it's something that we all need to keep in mind.
And this was also like 20 years ago. So even me thinking about it, I'm like, they were kind of before their time. Like 25 years ago, people were very excluded.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting that's, you know, that wasn't that long ago, and 20 years moves so, you know, so quickly. The fact that even the parents on, you know, like there was a separation that was created without understanding that even that provides a, you know, a foundation for how that child is going to grow up and interacting with the world, that we had this, you know, this idea of separation. That's alarming, and that it was actually 20 years ago wasn't that long ago, and yet we still see it. By the way, it's not like it's gone away. It's not like it's gotten better, but it hasn't really gone away. So, which leads to what I think where you were kind of going is, in certain areas, you know, still today, inclusion. It's like you have to make an effort to include, right? And so, I'm just gonna say one thing. Imagine if, like, the mother didn't say anything to you and let the child just sort of be with you and hanging out with you in the pool. It's almost like they imposed a stigma to some degree, right? They kind of told you, like, I'll take her away if you're uncomfortable or scared. Automatically, they're like, that's something to be uncomfortable about or scared about.
Yes.
And if I don't know how to deal with it as a young child, that is going to be my response.
As opposed to what you said, which is, she likes this, she likes so and so, she may do this, but all it means is blah blah blah. And you know, now that you think about it, I'm saying in retrospect, and I wasn't even there, but in retrospect, from the outside looking in, she probably couldn't say, if she does this, if she does A, it means B. If she says C, she wants D. And the only reason a parent who's loving enough to bring her child to this party anyway and take this chance, the only reason a parent that loving would not tell you those things is because she didn't know. So she too is limited by, you know, the communication of the day. As it is right now, my son is 16. He was diagnosed with autism at 3. I still find myself, I'm a little slower than my wife in that regard. But I still find myself going, wait a minute, this is what this means, this is what that means. And you can never run out of you can never ask too many questions. You can never run out of how many ways you ask a question. And it goes back to something that we often say, which is that questions are just so much more powerful than statements, and we have to continue to ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we just get on soapbox.
Oh, no,
It's
I
about
love
you.
everything. Well, I'm not even sure where I was going at that point, but after what you guys were just saying, making the effort like to be inclusive, because I mean, how I don't have anyone in my family with a diagnosed disability, and my children, they're very young, but as of now, there is no disability. Me and my husband don't have a disability, and we make the effort to be as inclusive as possible as a family of, a white family of 4 people that we
We're
are.
glad you just said that, because
I was going to say that too. Yeah.
As we're talking about inclusion, I just keep thinking, I'm acknowledging several things. One, that which we always acknowledge, which is that we are not going to have enough time here today. But two, there's, we always like to say, and we usually say this comes up in the closing of the show, which is that we should be more childlike and less childish. Be curious about other people. And you just have this about you in the broadest of manners. So you just talked about, so we're talking about, special needs versus neurotypical, but then you just mentioned, race. So the same thing applies to gender, socioeconomic, whatever the case is. This is me and this is what I do. How do I remain curious about somebody else? And at a time when we seem so divided and we forget the things that we have in common, and we seem like we're almost paid to remember the differences that we have, it is so refreshing and so important to have a conversation with someone that seems to be the walking question of how can I make sure that other people are included? And I'm going to resist the temptation to go down the road of politics right now, because that's the best example of the division that it is that's taking place. So just thank you so very much for that. I greatly appreciate it.
And Kayla, where did you go to school up in the Bay Area?
San Francisco State.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you grew up in San Clemente. You went to college in the Bay Area, which is incredibly progressive. Spent a little time down again in Southern California, and now back up to the state of Washington, which also is fairly progressive in many ways. So it's interesting to see how all of this plays and what you're observing, right, with schools and other organizations. Yeah.
And I know we keep going back to it, and it's almost like I'm pulling them into the interview, but you have to understand it may be lost on you because you're just being who you are, but that is not common, number one, and two, it is what most of us should strive to do. It's what I wouldn't sit there and say I'm an inclusion person and I do so and so and I'm just this and I'm just that. I work because I never try to rest on my laurels, in terms of who I am. So with that said, and it coming so naturally for you, despite the fact that you work on it, where does that come from? I mean, in terms of your origin and your superpowers, is that your family, more your mom, your dad, your grandparents?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I could talk about this all day. So I would think the biggest transition was moving to San Francisco. I mean, the first week there, I remember talking to my mom or dad on the phone, and I was just like, yeah, everyone is speaking all these different languages. Like, I am not used to hearing such a variety of languages, like walking to class. And I was there for a decade. So I just was so immersed in different cultures. I went to so many different holiday parties that weren't Christmas, and so many different, I became really close with the Jewish fraternity and sororities up there. And I went to Hillel now I can't remember any of the words. And I am kind of Jewish, like my culture. We never practiced it. So it's the verbiage is always lost on me. But, so I think that big move to San Francisco was huge. That was a huge moment of me being like, okay, my life in Orange County, I grew up in this very white bubble. and was just very unaware of like what else was out there. And so I think San Francisco and their graduate program for extensive support needs is just amazing. Like their teaching credential program, I absolutely love it. And they were huge on inclusion. So then when I went to teach and I was like, oh, you guys aren't including? Like I thought this was just something that everyone did so normally.
Yeah.
It was all just really interesting. So then when I moved back down to Orange County, all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, like this is just so different. And I mean, it felt really hard working with the parents, even in Orange County, because I felt like everyone felt really entitled to anything, like anything they wanted. They just thought I had to give it to them. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like focusing here on inclusion, and they would be focusing on something just like, just kind of random that I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll do that too. But like, I
They
don't know.
wanted
They were
things that
like
were
so
exclusive,
adamant
probably.
about their child, like learning to tie their shoes. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even tie my shoes. Like most of my shoes are slip-ons. Like, why is that such a big deal to you? Don't you want your child to make friends? Like
Yeah.
so it was just really weird that like,
That's
Mhm.
you
interesting.
know, coming from this very liberal area, coming back to not so much a liberal area, um, that was a huge mind flip for me. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, still, even while we were living in Orange County with our two children during COVID, which made everything obviously so much harder, we did take, we try very hard to like have books and TV shows and like with people that don't look like my children as the characters. So we
Mm-hmm.
try, and toys, like we try very hard to have different cultures, different abilities, just everything. We're like normalizing it in our house that
Yeah.
not everybody looks like us. And that's fine.
That's huge. That's such a valuable thing. And on one hand, I'm sitting there, praising you for it, and at the same time, it's like it should be normal and it shouldn't be worthy of praise. I guess there should be just as much, if not more, energy put on the fact that it's not normal. But this is what happens when a person has what I refer to as a backyard mentality. And Los Angeles is the best example of that because the Southern California, between LA and I guess bordering San Diego is the best example of it, or just even say LA, because you've got the San Fernando Valley, which is the biggest suburb, and then you've got Los Angeles. And so many people, even though they're right next to each other, live in one and never go to the other. And so the same thing happens with other people in certain parts of the country, which is why they have a misconception about people in California, or people in California that have a misconception about people on the East Coast. Well, don't they do so and so? Don't they do that? And so then the same mentality bleeds into religion and things like that. And you have so many groups of people or communities that are just completely misunderstood. And there's this thought, if there's a thought that's given as to how people of a certain group think or operate, and it's just so far from the truth. We just got to remain curious for all the days of our lives. I'm sorry, I could talk about that forever.
Yeah, I think it's that if somebody looks different or they're doing something that's different than your experience, we do rush to judgment. We rush to judge. We rush to make up our own decisions, or we make up our own stories about it, and rather than than ask to be involved. And we've talked about this as parents of children with special needs. My child doesn't want to be excluded, doesn't want to be stared at, doesn't want to be pointed at, doesn't want to, they just want to they want to feel like they're just part of everything else. They feel like they're part of something. To your point, Kayla, which I think is brilliant, and I want to talk about your book, because what happens is when they see somebody who doesn't look like them, it broadens their experience. And for those children who have a diagnosis of some kind, to see somebody that does look like them in the mainstream is also powerful, right? So that it all exists, and all of the stuff that you talk about and the work that you're doing in schools and stuff. You wrote a book. So Tyler the Snake is the name of your book. So because I think it involves a lot of this stuff. Will you talk about that a little bit and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Tyler the Snake is a book that I wrote. I mean, I don't know, within this last year or two. Tyler is actually the student that I was the one-on-one aide for. So he's the one who definitely pushed me into the deafblind field, where I was just like, oh, this makes so much sense. I'm so interested in this, and how to have this whole population included in our community, in the community.
Yeah.
And then I chose a snake because snakes are actually deafblind. Like they use vibrations to see or to figure out how far things are. Like if there's danger, like if people are walking, like they feel the vibrations and that's how they leave. And I think they can really only see better at like nighttime. But their vision and hearing, like they don't rely on their vision or hearing. They rely on more like tactile cues. So I just thought I was like Googling deafblind animals when I was trying to figure out what this
Interesting.
animal was going to be. And then all the other characters in the book, they all have a disability, but I don't know if any of the other ones are actually really specified. It's all kind of just like, oh, Maurice the mole uses a white cane to get around, and like, what kind of talks about that. And Julie the squirrel has a lot of energy and needs to make sure she like runs around like before class, so she's like ready to sit and learn. And so each character just kind of has their own accommodations that like I would think are very normal accommodations that people have. But yeah, so this book is really just, having another character out there for kids who are deafblind to see that like, you can be deafblind and have a classroom and have friends. And, and this Tyler the snake has an AAC device. And so they get to walk through like a conversation where he's using his AAC device to communicate with a friend. And just kind of giving.
And the book is sort of like, let's go with Tyler to the classroom and see all these other kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And people can get it. I know, looks like we just put up the link on our chat at Amazon. Beautiful.
That's the only place, because Amazon does like, you can self-publish on there. So
yeah,
it's not like anyone paid me to write this book. I just wrote it. I found an illustrator and then I put it on Amazon.
Fantastic. That's fantastic.
Got it.
Kayla, tell us about, because I never heard the term until we met recently to prep for your appearance here today. Even as a father to a child with special needs and working as an advocate, I had never heard the term of reverse mainstreaming. Is that what it sounds like? And let me tell you what I imagine.
Yeah.
I know a friend of the show as well, Georgiano Junko Kelman, who's a special needs attorney, an education attorney. He's one of the first people that I heard, first of several, say, we so often try to make sure that we have our children adapt to fit into the world, when we should be working just as hard to, and I'm paraphrasing here, working just as hard to have the world fit around our child. Is that essentially what reverse mainstreaming is? Because mainstreaming generally means getting the kid, a child, to take place in a gen ed classroom, at least in some, if not all, of the classes. Is reverse mainstreaming sort of the opposite? How does that work?
So reverse mainstreaming is the students in the general education classrooms coming into the special education classroom. And this was, so how I'm kind of taking Inclusion Starts Now at this point is like kind of focusing on people who really want inclusion happening, but like the district, like there's people holding it up. Cause like if the district or the school isn't going to be on board, it's like, how can me as a one person kind of get inclusion happening? And reverse mainstreaming was just a great way for students and for teachers to like come into my classroom and to see what we're doing, that we're also doing work, and like what kind of, like that we have like a sensory wall, or we have like a little break corner, and that like you can have that in your classroom and I can help you set it up. And it was a lot of like, and this was also a way that I built trust with a lot of teachers, where if they had students that they like were just having like a really hard time and they needed kind of like a break from that student, I would say like, send them over to my classroom, like send a few over, and we can like we can read together. They can come and do our math project or art project or whatever the activity is we're doing. Like, I can very easily have them join us. And so sometimes it was like some students would actually work to be in our classroom. Like they would have to earn tokens in their setting, and then they would get to come into my classroom at the end of the day. And during all this, the students, the like typically developing peers, were never like helpers. Like they didn't come in and help my students. They just came in and got to work on whatever we were working on with my students.
Wow.
And so sometimes we would like, we did silent reading after lunch. And so sometimes like they would come in for that, and it would be, they would just like be with a student, like reading in the corner or something. Or maybe if like my student wasn't reading by themselves, like they were coming in and like helping read to that student, but it still wasn't like a teacher student relationship. It's not like they were teaching them to read. They were just like, oh yeah, read this book and I'll read it out loud.
Just
peer.
hanging out or socializing. So is that a concept or a term that you coined then, reverse mainstreaming?
No. I wish. That'd be cool. No. But no.
See, there's another example again, because I try to be, I'm sorry, Brian, real quick. I try to be awake and conscious. And as much as you think you are, you can never raise that too high. And as awake and conscious as I try to be, again, like I said, I had never heard of reverse mainstreaming. That's fantastic. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
I was going to say, Kayla, what's fascinating about this is that, so many, well, listen, I'm going to speak from experience here in Los Angeles, and the LA Unified School District is this monstrous, behemoth of an organization. And we have class sizes that are very large, in those classes a lot of time. And then probably this is across the country. They have children who've not been diagnosed, right? So they may have an issue, they may have a learning issue, and it's not been diagnosed. And so if a teacher's like, man, I just don't know how to deal with student X or student Y, and they're disruptive, and if they came and they saw what you do in your classroom, or if they had a conversation with you, you might be able to make a recommendation like, oh, you can get one of those seats that for children who are fidgety, or a fidget spinner, if that helps them, to focus and concentrate, because they've not been diagnosed with something. Maybe having some understanding of a tool or something that could be used in a mainstream class. And now you can introduce some of the concepts into regular classrooms. And is that kind of what you do with Inclusion Starts Now? Is that some of the consulting work that you do in your business?
So the consulting work that I do is really, coming in and like seeing how they're doing it, and then trying to give them the right tools to even do it better. Because again, what I see a lot is that they get the student into the classroom and they're like, okay, like they're in the classroom, they have like their fun toys that they get to like play with when everyone else is doing math. And it's like, okay, so they're in the classroom, but like that's not them doing a totally different activity while all of the other students are doing math. Like that's not inclusion. Inclusion,
that's segregation.
Like, so it's like, how are you going to help that student be a part of that math lesson? And one of the students right now, we're just working on getting a switch, like a button for him to push to like answer the question, because he uses picture icons and like some basic sign language to communicate right now. But it's, still like he can be asked a yes or no question and like push a button to participate. And then going to his desk, like we've given like slant boards, and maybe the aide will write it with a highlighter first, and then he can try to trace, or whatever his personal IEP academic goals are, they can all be used in the classroom during the activities that everybody is doing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's what we work on a lot. And I think it's hard because everyone's afraid, or people that I'm working with are really afraid to, I think, just kind of make that jump, because there's a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to do it until it's perfect. Like I'm just going to let them play with these toys until I can really figure out how to, modify this activity best for them. And it's like, sometimes you just need to like jump in and do it, because you have to see where the student is at.
Being ready is completely overrated. Yes.
So every time you do something, you just have to see how the student's going to respond. And then, if you have to make it easier or harder, based off the student. But I've also helped with like IEP goals and trying to make the IEP goals inclusive. So
Yeah.
we'll say like, you know, in a small reading group with 2 or more peers, the student will, you know, go through a book and like basic understanding of like what way to hold the book, being able to open the book, like knowing to look at towards the words or the pictures, like, you know, whatever, again, the student is capable of doing, but how to make it inclusive and not them just sitting there with their own, you know,
Yeah.
fidgets. Like, even though fidgets are great for like learning, but, you know, they shouldn't just be playing with their fidgets and then like not participating.
Not learning.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Kayla,
Yeah.
let me ask you, is the work that Inclusion Starts Now, the work that Inclusion Starts Now does, is that work limited to the educational arena? And the reason why I ask is because we've had one guest in all the time that we've been on now for 2 years talk about working with, I don't know so much law enforcement, but with businesses in terms of how to identify and communicate and work with people. And there was a post that I saw from the comedian D.L. Hewley. It was actually a couple of years old. And he talked about how people just refer to his son as being defiant. And, you know, from a racial standpoint, being a father of a black son, what's defiant is cute at a certain age. After as he gets older, that's threatening to people that might not know how to handle him. What, you know, and so I'm wondering, I've been thinking about the need to teach the community at large, whether it's businesses or law enforcement or things like that. Is Inclusion Starts Now limited to the educational world, or are you teaching inclusion outside of that?
Well, as of now, it's only just been through education. No one's reached out to me to do business, like to work with businesses or law enforcement. I mean, I would absolutely love that. I would take really whatever I can get. I mean, as of now, social media has just been a great platform for me to just keep, you know, saying whatever I can about inclusion for free and just
Right.
trying to get people listening, thinking about it, figuring out how they can practice inclusion at home or in their classroom or at their job. And I mean, I I tend to do this. You know, people are always saying I put too much on my plate or I spread myself too thin, whatever. Uh, I have like a blog and a YouTube channel and a newsletter. Like, I have all these different ways to basically, you know, being the special education teacher, I'm trying to get any type of learner. It's like,
Sure.
oh, you like to watch videos? Here, let me do
Right.
this. Oh, you want to read something? Here's this. Like, you want to
Right.
watch a 30-second reel or a 2-second reel about one piece of information that I can get to you? Like, I will send it to you.
And the
So
great thing about that is,
everything.
and people can get like I know your Instagram handle is Inclusion Starts Now. Is that how they can find you on all the different platforms? You use that same
Yeah.
handle for the most part? Yeah.
Everything
Brilliant.
is Inclusion Starts Now. I think
Beautiful.
Twitter was the only one that I didn't have enough characters, but I've kind of stopped Twitter. So
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But you know, our whole purpose when we created this show and this platform was to be able to shine a light on people that our first thought was shine a light on people that are serving the special needs community. And we begin to expand beyond that. And I don't know, I just have the overwhelming feeling, and I'm sure that there are people that are listening now that feel the same way. You know, if you know that this woman has served the community in an educational sense, working for a school district, she now has this entity that she started where she's just sort of giving value, and it's not like a full-fledged business yet per se. I just have this overwhelming desire to see you succeed, and to see Inclusion Starts Now become this one-stop shop for people that for teaching people about inclusion. And you may have people that are, and I'm sorry, this is just my vision in my head, people that are employed by you, people that are part of your team, whatever the case might be,
I'd
that
love that.
have empathy for a community because that's their community, whether it's, who knows what it might be, LGBTQ, whatever have you, various areas, so that you are sort of a hub for teaching inclusion and how the world gets to become a better place just by having people reminded of the things that we have in common. And any role that we can play in that taking place, we'd be happy to do it. I get a sense that maybe we'll be working together in the future as we try to, help
I
shine a
would
light on that.
absolutely love that. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest or the broadest thing I've been trying to do right now is making an e-course, like just how to be inclusive. I mean, it's kind of like inclusion 101.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think starting January is really like we're in this huge move right now. But January, I will not be working in California anymore. So all I will be focusing on is inclusion starts now. And I mean, my children, uh, they will get a lot of attention. They're pretty young. But
So is everybody hearing that you're walking away from your job to pursue the dream of fully launching Inclusion Starts Now?
I mean, I don't know if I was walking away from my job. It was more that I was moving to Washington and I just can't keep working in California.
Yeah.
But I do, I mean, I think it was kind of getting to that point where I was really wanting to focus on Inclusion Starts Now. And
Mhm.
having this other job was really like, I had to give time to it. So I am
Yeah.
really excited to have this sole focus on this business that I've just kind of always been having like on the side for the last 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm really
Beautiful.
excited to
Are
really
you
focus on it January.
are you writing more books?
I really want to. I really want to do some books that focus on holidays and how to be inclusive during holiday seasons. I do feel like, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, like there are some holidays that just get really focused on. And I really want to do more books of like other things we can do in October where like, or how to have everyone trick or treat and how we
Mhm.
can also celebrate Dia de los Muertos, or if someone
Mhm.
doesn't
Mhm.
celebrate these holidays, how can we still talk about like fall? And then like winter season, like I mean, I love Christmas. That is what I celebrate. I listen to Christmas music all year round. But I've been trying to bring like my Jewish culture back in, and we bought, this toddler menorah this last year. We bought a lot of books focusing on all these different holidays, and the one that starts with a D that I know I'm gonna mess up the saying. Diwali.
Diwali?
Yeah,
Diwali.
Diwali.
we
Yeah.
got a book about that. We get all these children's books about all these different holidays um,
Yeah.
that I just, because I don't want my children growing up the way that I did, where when I became 18, all of a sudden I was like, what? You don't celebrate Christmas? Like everyone celebrates Christmas. Um, and I just don't want them to think that. I want them to know that, like, yeah, we celebrate this, but everyone else celebrates their own traditions and holidays, and it's fun to learn
Yeah.
about. And um,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the
Beautiful.
whole theme of the holiday season is everyone coming together and teaching kindness. And,
Mhm.
sometimes we get really stuck on like, we have to be good so Santa can bring us presents. And I hate that so much. Anytime I keep telling my daughter or my firstborn, um, whenever people say like, have you been nice?
Have you
Like
been nice? Have you
here,
been a good girl this
I
year?
I
Yeah.
keep telling her, I'm like, you need to ask them if they've been nice, or like I keep trying to think of something. I'm like, well, how about you just tell them you're nice because you just like to be kind to people? Like
Mm.
we don't
Mhm.
Yeah.
do it
Yeah.
for presents. And we like met Santa the other day at the mall, and I was kind of she's 2 at 2.5, and I was walking her through like, Santa might ask you like if you want any kind of presents this year or something. Is there any questions you want to ask Santa? And then she kind of thought about it and was like, well, what does Santa want for Christmas? I'm like, it's a great
Ah,
question.
There
Let's
you
go ask
that's
go.
all. I love that.
that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
so
that.
That means you're doing something right. That's fantastic.
For
What we're
sure.
gonna do
hopefully.
is,
Hold on.
go ahead.
I just was going to say that for those who are listening, if you come back to our YouTube channel afterwards, in the chat, we put all of the links to all of Kayla's social media. So Instagram, TikTok, her YouTube channel, Facebook, and watch some of these videos and watch some of her posts. If Instagram is your thing, watch her reels. There, it's so amazing and consistent in messaging, and also with ideas that you may implement in your own in your own world as well. So sorry, Shawn, I didn't just want to jump and let people know that they can
No,
find
right
Kayla.
along those same lines. Generally, I think what we do is we'll have like show notes or whatever where we promote whatever our guests may be working on or what they may have as far as social and things of that sort. But what we're going to make sure that we do is when the episode is up on all the other platforms, we're going to make sure that we include the Amazon link so people are aware of the book, because I'm so fascinated and curious about the book right now, just knowing the story. And it's funny. I feel like I'm going through like an internal Benjamin Button thing or something, because every now and then my son will be scrolling and look at Sesame Street, and it takes me back to two things: how much I enjoyed it as a kid, how much after the period where it was kind of dead to me and I just didn't pay any attention to it throughout the 80s and everything. But when he was first born, I enjoyed watching it with him just as much, if not more, than I did when I was a kid. And there's a children's author by the name of Ezra Jack Keats, whose work I love. And there's something to be said about just getting into the simple world of a children's book and looking at the message and everything. And I think that there's, if we can get back to, again, look, I think that older people and children are closer to God because of either having just got here or being technically closer to departure. So as a result, we tend to be at our best then, some to a fault. Older people sometimes may get grouchy depending on what their life has been like, who knows. But we don't have any considerations for limitations, as children and everything. So we can just, take the lesson. There's so many lessons around us from children. And I just think that, I think you have so much of that in you in terms of just being the eternal question and being eternally curious about other people. And that is a precious, precious, precious thing, and the key to this world really being a better place. So I want to make sure that we let as many people know about that as we possibly can and encourage them to take that path and attitude. Thank you.
Kayla, is there any wonder why we tend to go long on our podcasts? Shawn, it's time for us to ask the question because we're getting close to the end of the episode. So let's. We
are.
And by the way, I didn't want to take anything away from you, Kayla. Really, you're doing amazing work.
Oh,
so I'm not
thank
taking
you.
anything away. It's really incredible. Yeah. Go ahead, Shawn.
This is the point of the show where we usually ask the following question, which is, our ability to change the world or make it a better place is based upon how willing or capable we are of changing ourselves. And so with that said, give us an example, if you can, just one, of a belief that you once believed very strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
Okay. So I have thought about this so much. I even had conversations with my husband and my mom. I was just like, because it's something, and I think I talked about this when I was talking to you too before this podcast, I'm not sure how to say all of the ways that you show it. This social scientist, Adam Grant, wrote this book called Think Again. And his whole book is about the concept of that we should always be reevaluating our values and our goals. Like we should never just sit there and think, 10 years, this is what I want, because we grow. Like in those 10 years, we grow, we become different people, and everything will always be changing. And so I just love this question so much because it was just really hard for me to think of like this one, just even thinking of an example. But the example that kind of came to mind that also just goes with the whole special education realm is that my sister at one point, when I first started grad school, or maybe I was a graduate student, I was a teacher. And my sister told me that she thought she had autism because she couldn't give eye contact to people at Starbucks or something. Like whatever her reasoning was, I felt like it was just not a good reason. And I was so quick to just be like, you don't have autism. Like you need, that's not like, don't give that as an excuse that like you can't look people in the eye because of this diagnosis that you're giving yourself because you took some quiz online. And I was just so adamant of like, no, you do not have autism. And she was very upset. This was a very heated conversation between the two of us. Within the next few years of me working at different schools, just getting more involved with different organizations, and I ended up reading this book called the KISS Quotient. and the woman author has autism, and so she made this character that was also diagnosed with autism, and it talked about how autism in women is very different, and just all this stuff. And after reading that, I was like, oh, you know what? Like, does kind of sound like my sister. And so I went back to her and I told her that, and it was a whole other conversation. But that change, like how adamant I was of like, no, you don't have autism, like stop saying that, to like, you know what? I shouldn't be the person to tell you if you think you have this diagnosis or not. I mean, if you think you're on the spectrum, like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, is there something that you would want like help from me? Cause like I work with a lot of people on the autism spectrum, or, so it was a huge moment of me feeling like, I shouldn't ever tell somebody that they're right or wrong, and that I should instead have, let it be a conversation of, why do you think that? Like, what do you want to come out of this conversation? Like, why are you telling me that? And like, how can I be here to help you? Or, kind of like, what do you want from me as like what our relationship is? And so that is the best example that I could think of. But I definitely, so how Adam Grant explains it in his book, that we get stuck on Mount Stupid, that once we learn this, usually like around grad school or undergrad, we like learn all this information about a topic we're really interested in and we love it. And it's like we can't get any more information. And then we just kind of stop. And then people will say something, we're like, nope, you're wrong. I know it. This is the right answer. But his whole book is about that we should be embracing when we're wrong, because now that we know we were wrong about something, we're now closer to becoming more right. But the whole idea is that we're never 100% right, because things are always changing. I mean, language is always changing. We're always changing.
For sure.
And so I just I love that question. I mean, I kept asking it to people like, so what would you say? Because I just think it's a great reflective question on just like what we're all.
See, Kayla, you don't know that I have the ability to read minds, and right now I'm reading Brian's. You see that look on his face? Not that one, the one before, and then the one where he turned his head. No, this is, you gotta, and in all sincerity though, Brian, I can't tell you, especially as we're closing, the appreciation I have for our relationship and connection. When we first started doing this, I was crazy enough to just, here's a good question. And I would just ask people the question. The question wouldn't come up. One, it didn't come up in prep for the show. And two, it didn't come with context. I'd be like, hey, tell me a belief that you had. And it just so happened that the first couple episodes, people were able to go, wow, that's good. That's a good question. And they would answer it. But Brian was honest enough to say to me, he says, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that question. I don't like it. I don't. And he didn't think it should be in the show. And then he came back to me and he said, well, here's the reason why. And it gives me pause, makes me ask it myself. You should ask it with context. And we got enough of a blessing where we never had a situation where I didn't ask it without context long enough to catch somebody completely off guard. And there's such a value in having relationships with people that don't love you blindly, but love you real, where they're like, you know what, here's something that you need to work on. And all of that goes hand in hand. But anyway, now I'm rambling, but my appreciation runs.
We joke about it because I used to hate it. I used to hate the question. I like, because people are like, oh God, I don't know. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole bunch of answers so I used to drive me crazy. Now I just,
the key is to ask it of yourself often, because it should always be evolving too.
Yeah. See, my I used to think that it was a terrible question. Now I've come to change. I love the question. By the way, I follow Adam Grant, and I think anybody who wants to follow Adam Grant on Instagram, that book Think Again is also a great referral, and so that's beautiful.
Yes,
we're coming to the end of the show, so thank you for that, and Adam's going to appreciate you just promoted his book.
Oh, I would love to meet Adam Grant someday. That would be. If you ever have him on your podcast, you let me know. Okay,
for sure. For sure.
You're reading my mind.
And now we're getting we're getting nudged by our producer Shawn Hall in Hawaii. Who's like, wrap it up, guys. So as we wrap up this episode, Just Two Dads. I'll just say, I'll do it quickly, do my wrap up, and it goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about today, which is, empathy and love. It's such an important thing today, now more than ever. Look at somebody in their situation, have some empathy. You don't know what they're going through. You know what they've been through. Have some empathy. Be curious, right? And as opposed to being judgmental, and look at the world through the lenses of love. It just changes how the world looks. So, empathy and love, as always. Kayla, it's so great to talk to you. This hour went by like that, as we knew it would. We really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we'll get some folks to look up your stuff and call Kayla to learn about inclusion. I'll throw it to Shawn to close us out.
I'll make it really short. I want to thank Kayla for her time today. It was just such a pleasure and honor. I want to thank everyone that took the time to join us. I want to thank the women in my life without whom I would not be. That is my amazing wife, Laura, and my mom, Jan. And I also want to encourage everyone to just remember that we're working with Billy Footwear. Billy Footwear is a shoe company in Denton. Was founded by Billy Price, who actually fell out of a window 2 weeks into his freshman year in college, was paralyzed from the chest down, learned how to do everything for himself with the exception of putting on shoes. A prototype was created and Billy Footwear was born this past year. They sold their 1 millionth pair of shoes. And if you use the link that is on the show notes and in the screen, you'll get 10% off of your purchase. Again, my gratitude for our time here today is immeasurable. And I thank everybody. And just remember, wherever you are hearing us, we love you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kayla. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks.